Okay, so this guy named J. Frank Dalton came forward in the 1940s, claiming to be the notorious Jesse James. According to him, he had faked his death way back in the day and had been living under an assumed alias ever since. But then again, Dalton said a lot of things. In addition to being the most famous outlaw of all time, he also claimed to be a fighter pilot in World War I. Said he was a member of the super secretive Knights of the Golden Circle, and my own personal favorite, that he was able to travel the world using nothing but astral projection. Look, guys like Dalton are a dime a dozen. He was clearly a fraud, and there's no shortage of Old West fakesters. But the thing that sets Dalton apart from the others, especially guys like Brushy Bill Roberts, is that we still don't know who Dalton was. I mean, don't get me wrong, he was definitely not Jesse James, but there has been a lot of speculation over the years that he may have been an outlaw, or at the very least that he rode with Quantrell and Bloody Bill Anderson. In other words, J. Frank Dalton remains a mystery. Until today. Maybe. Okay, so my buddy James Townsend over at the Billy the Kid Historical Coalition was recently able to track down some very, very interesting information regarding Dalton's past, and I think you're going to find it just as fascinating as I did. Matter of fact, I'll just go ahead and say it. He very well may have discovered Dalton's true identity. We'll get to that in just a moment, and I'll even let James tell you in his own voice. But just in case you're not familiar, like I said, James is part of the Billy the Kid Historical Coalition. He has an excellent YouTube channel called Chasing Billy, one of my favorite channels on all of YouTube. And he's got a blog by the same name. The blog and the channel both are mostly focused on Billy the Kid history. Accurate Billy the Kid history. And James also recently published a book titled A Noted Man, The Secret Service Reports of Azariah Wild. Wild, of course, was the Secret Service agent sent to New Mexico to hunt down none other than Billy the Damn Kid. Now, James and I just sat down and had a nice long conversation about everything from J. Frank Dalton to Brushy Bill Roberts and Billy the Kid. There's just one problem, though. For someone whose entire living is earned via the internet, I am very, very bad when it comes to technology. I don't know what I did, but the audio and even the video, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's not all that great. It's a little choppy. I wasn't even going to release it, but James had some really cool stuff to say. So I kind of feel like I'd be doing you a disservice by not putting it out there. Just to give you an idea, like I said, I'm not really sure what happened, but my laptop completely shut down while we were talking. Like, black screen, boom, gone. Luckily, we were winding down, so James, always the professional, was able to finish the show out. But the embarrassing part is that my face was stuck on the screen in a, not so flattering angle. Let's just leave it at that. Anyway, we'll go ahead and get right down to it. Enough of my yapping. I think you're really going to enjoy this. Please check out James's other stuff. I'll drop a link to all of it down below. But without further ado, it is my pleasure to present the great James Townsend. Can you give me a quick rundown of who J. Frank Dalton was?
Yeah, I'll give you the rundown of who I think J. Frank Dalton was, because a lot of people still, surprisingly, in my opinion, would say that he is Jesse James still. So,
Well, hey, 1 second. Before we do the great reveal,
I'm not.
can you just give me like a okay, yeah, just a quick idea who J. Frank was, who he said he was, and then before you give the reveal, by the way, I just want to let everybody know I do not know what you're about to say. We've talked a little bit about it, but I don't know like his true identity, so I want to kind of venture a guess before you actually reveal the identity. But
absolutely,
all right, I'll stop blabbering
and you know, as kind of a teaser for folks who are interested in Dalton, I think I've definitely tracked the man back farther than I've ever seen him track before, with some confidence. But I think I found who he was, identity-wise, and I'll present that forth as a theory. And hopefully, as a community, we can research that, all of us who are interested, and see if it pans out. It may not. There are still some gaps in the record that this might not potentially pan out. But I'm a very open source kind of researcher. I don't like to sit on my research as some secret and then hoard it for the glory and say like this is mine. In my opinion, the more eyes you have on a topic, the quicker we can get something figured out. And history is more about, for me, reporting what happened and the truth and the fascinating aspects of that, and not for, you know, what I'm going to put in my next book or my next video or blog, which that stuff's all fun. We both would love to write tons of books, I'm sure, but it's not what we're here for ultimately. So yeah, I'm going to present that theory, and it may be wrong and it may be right, and hopefully we can all work on it together. But J. Frank Dalton showed up in the 1930s mainly. Um, he claimed he was born on March 8th, 1848, I believe. It could be March 5th. I'm going by memory here, but he claimed to be born in 1848 in Goliad, Texas, and that um, his father was on his way to fight in the Mexican War, and they stopped in Texas, and he was born. I don't know why his whole family was going, or how that factored in. But anyway, he called himself an accidental Texan because his family was from Georgia and they had him in Texas. And then he joined the Civil War in, I believe it was Missouri, and signed up with Quantrell's Raiders. A big thing of this time was they would spell Quantrell with an E, so it was more. I don't know how folks pronounce it now, like Quantrill. William Clark Quantrell.
Mm-hmm.
Very vicious Confederate guerrilla. Um, Ran with Bloody Bill Anderson, of course, Jesse James and Frank James. That's where they cut their teeth. The Youngers, all those guys, they ran with Quantrell. J. Frank Dalton said he signed up with them. So, of course, J. Frank knew the Youngers and the Jameses. And he loved to travel around Texas and other parts of nearby states, but mainly Texas, and tell folks. He always had the habit of dropping into the newspaper office or wherever he could get the most visibility and let them know that he was, one of the oldest Civil War veterans alive, that he'd rode with Quantrell, he knew Jesse James, and would offer a little tidbit of old timer wisdom. And, that's how he would get his publicity, and he would go from town to town. He liked to drink, and he was often a vagrant or living in a hut outside of town, and he would just tell these stories. And when it got kind of crazy about Jesse James still being alive in the late 1930s or the 1940s, J. Frank Dalton rode around and told people he knew Jesse James was dead because he saw the body. He was a U.S. Marshal at, I believe, Fort Scott at the time, and he was called down to St. Joseph to view Jesse's body because everybody knew that he knew Jesse and could positively identify him. So he got down there to St. Joseph when Jesse's laying in the house. They've got his body out, and he says, "Wait, before you uncover that body, let me tell you what scars Jesse has." And he does, and they uncover the body, and the scars are there, and he says, "Yep, that's Jesse." So for a while, he ran around telling everybody he knew he was dead, and um, he viewed the body. And Frank Dalton, his story was just as crazy as Brushy Bill's. People say that these guys are like the Forrest Gumps of the old timer world. So, you know, Frank Dalton was a Civil War Confederate guerrilla, fought with Quantrell. Once the war was over, they took off towards Mexico. He went with General Shelby to Mexico, and then turned right back around because he didn't want to fight with Maximilian. He became a Texas Ranger and worked the chasing outlaws with the Rangers, and then he went up to Oklahoma territory and was a U.S. Marshal. Somewhere in there, he joined the Army and almost rode to Little Bighorn with Custer, but didn't. I think in one instance he tried to save Custer. He got married while he was in the Army to the colonel's daughter. Fought in World War I for Canada. Flew a plane. Got injured with mustard gas. He fought the Boer War with the British over in Africa. This guy, he was in every armed conflict from the Civil War to World War I, and
The total
it was
badass, huh?
just absurd, just absurd. And that's J. Frank Dalton. And so in 1948, he links up with this guy named Lee Houck, also called Lee Hawk, Orvis Lee Houck. Um, and this guy's kind of like a showman's talent manager. That's kind of the vibe he gives. But he's all about treasure hunting and stuff. And anyway, they link up in Texas, and this treasure hunter named, ironically, Joe Hunter, uh, comes forward in Lawton, Oklahoma, and says, "I found this copper bucket with all kinds of names on it, like Jesse James and Bud Dalton, and this, and it's hidden treasure, and it's pointing to all this buried treasure." So this buried treasure theme starts getting into the media, the national newspapers, and that's when Lee Houck, Dalton, at this time Dalton's agent, contacts Joe Hunter and is like, "Let's sync up." And that's what drives Dalton and Houck to make the trip to Lawton, Oklahoma. They get up there, and Dalton's like, "I'm going to come forward as Jesse James. I'm really Jesse James. I wasn't killed that night in St. Joseph in 1882." And so that's when it starts. They get a hold of this newspaper, the Lawton, I think it's the Lawton Constitution, maybe. I forget the name of the paper, but these reporters from the paper work with the owners of the Merrimack Caverns, and they all orchestrate this big reveal. And this couple, John Shevlin and his wife, they come from Chicago, and they kind of broadcast it on the radio simultaneously, and it just takes the nation by storm. And here we are in 2025 talking about whether J. Frank Dalton was Jesse James.
I can't remember, but was it ever verified that the Bud Dalton guy ever had any connection with Jesse James?
No, nope. If you
No,
want
never
to,
Okay.
my opinion is that bucket's fabricated too, and they just made
Right,
that
right.
name up, Bud Dalton. But no,
Mhm.
as far as I know, there's no Bud Dalton. Um, Not that I'm aware of, at least.
Yeah. And just for everybody listening and watching, J. Frank Dalton would eventually link up with another favorite here on the Wild West Extravaganza, Brushy Bill Roberts.
Yes.
There's pictures of them together. I believe Brushy even visited Merrimack Cave. Do you know
Yeah.
if that's
Oh,
true or
yeah.
not?
Yes.
Okay.
Brushy. They had J. Frank Dalton's 102nd birthday up there, and Brushy
Okay.
came in and visited. And I believe Brushy even went to New York with Dalton. They went
I
to New
think so,
York to be
yeah.
on this radio program, and so on that
Mhm,
trip, they did this photo op with J. Frank Dalton, Brushy Bill, and this other guy, Colonel Davis, who actually later
mhm.
claimed to be Cole Younger, I think. um, uh, and they did this photo op, and it got published in all the papers. So Brushy got a little limelight too. And Brushy, they go back. They apparently were old friends, and Brushy would visit Dalton in Carlsbad, New Mexico early on. There's a picture of both of them standing upright. Dalton looks a lot healthier than he did in the days of his Jesse James claims. And these two guys went back, and I'm sure they all go back a long way. This little confederacy of frauds.
Confederates, I love that. Was was J. Frank Dalton also connected with, what was his name? Uncle Kit Carson, they called him?
Uncle Kit Carson figures in here somehow. I've never been able to
Yeah,
figure out quite how, but of course his real name was Ora Woodman, and he was, the
Laura
more I read
Woodman.
about him, he was a real, I, I mean, I don't want to cuss too much, but he was a real piece of shit.
Oh my goodness.
He abandoned his family. He took his daughter from his wife and didn't tell her. He stopped at home one day. You know, he's traveling around in these Wild West shows as Kit Carson. He came home, walked outside with his daughter, and never came back. And he made her his Native American Indian princess in these shows. And apparently would hit her. Um, according to this book I was just reading the other day that colleague Rufus sent to me, really shed a lot of light on it. And he was just not a good person. And when he died, his family tried to come and collect his things, and the police wouldn't even let him do it because he never acknowledged his family. And they, as far as they knew, his name was Kit Carson, not Ora Woodman,
Mhm.
and nobody knew about this. So he was a real piece of trash. And
Sounds like it.
uh, he had in his possession when he died a letter from Brushy Bill that I think he had copied. And Brushy Bill is saying like he calls Kit Carson dad, and he's like, "Hey dad, we're going to come visit you soon. Billy the kid stopped by the other day, and he's doing good. They're getting ready to go overseas." It was around the time of maybe the Korean War, the World War II, or something like that. He's talking about going overseas in the army. He's like, "We sure do miss them boys, and I'll come visit you soon." So a lot of folks have been puzzled about Brushy Bill saying, "Hey, Billy the kid stopped by." Well, I found out that Billy the Kid was actually the legal name of this guy named Billy the Kid Roberts, and he was named Billy the Kid on his birth certificate. And when Brushy's talking about that, he's talking about this guy Billy the Kid who came to see him. So somehow this Billy the Kid is tied in with him as well. And so yes, Uncle Kit Carson, Ora Woodman is somehow mixed up in this, but again, it's hard to tie any of these guys down. Um, because they had no qualms
Well,
about just changing their name and lying.
exactly. Lied like the rest of us change underwear, basically. So
Yeah,
the thing with Brushy Bill Roberts, he's on literally every U.S. census from what is it,
yeah,
1880
1880.
all the way to
Yeah,
his all the way to 1950. He's on
yes,
every single census. We have marriage certificates. We have a
yeah,
draft registration. We have divorce decrees. There is a
yeah.
mountain of evidence about Brushy Bill Roberts.
A mountain.
J. Frank
Yeah,
Dalton is way different. We know
way
who
different.
Brushy Bill Roberts was. We know where he lived every step along the way. We know the names of his wives. We know everything he did, his occupations. J. Frank Dalton has remained this big mystery. We
Yeah.
don't know that that's his real name. I'm pretty sure it's
Mhm.
not. I'm going to get to that in just a second. We don't know when he was truly born. You said it was 1848 he claimed to be born.
That's what he claimed. I always suspected it was
Yeah.
closer to 1870 because he didn't look that
Right.
old.
And now, like that's what I wanted to say before you actually do the big reveal. My
Yeah.
theory is, like you
Yes.
said, and with once again with Brushy Bill Roberts, he was not 91 when he died. Brushy Bill Roberts was only 70 or 71 years old at the time of his death.
Yeah.
That's why he looks so young. A lot of those pictures where he was supposedly on death's door were
Yeah.
taken at the governor's mansion. The guy was fine. He just had a heart attack and died. He didn't know he was dying.
Right.
Uh J. Frank Dalton clearly looks older than Brushy Bill, but I don't think he was that old. I don't think he was over 100 years old. So
No.
my theory, I don't know if you're about to prove me wrong or not. I think he was probably alive as the Civil War was happening, but
Mhm.
he was just a child. He wasn't
Yeah.
old enough to fight. He did not himself fight in the Civil War. Maybe his father did. Maybe he had older brothers that did. I don't think he did. And I don't know whether his real name's Dalton or not, but I definitely know he's not Jesse James. So, all that said, what is
Yeah.
your grand theory?
Um, so I think the thing that I'm learning from these old timers is I always thought they have to be somebody, right? And you hear that a lot with Brushy. A lot of folks are like, well, if he wasn't Billy the Kid, then he had to be somebody because he knew so much. And number one, no, he really didn't know that much. But number two, we we want these legends to be true. We love the story. We love this. Like, I would be thrilled if Billy the Kid survived. I'm not out here trying to like, tote the status quo like I'm getting paid to stomp out legendary theories. Like, this would be great if he survived, but it's just not true. And but we want these things to be somehow legendary. So you want Brushy. Well, he had to know something. He had to be connected somehow. And people say that about Frank Dalton as well. And I kind of even fell into that too because I thought at one time perhaps Frank Dalton was Bruce Younger. Bruce Younger was an uncle of the Younger boys, and nobody really knows what happened to him. And Frank Dalton was obsessed with Belle Starr. And I thought, Bruce Younger married Belle Starr at one point. So I still think that could be a possibility.
Hmm.
I saw a picture of Bruce Younger allegedly at one point, and he had the same little beady eyes that kind of are close in together that Frank Dalton had. So perhaps that's an angle
Hmm.
worth looking into that I never really closed
Yeah.
out. But, a lot of times real life has no theme or way things are supposed to be. We like stories because there's an ought to be to stories, and there's no ought to be in life. And a lot of times these guys, like Frank Dalton, they're just liars. They're just worthless pieces of trash who are liars. And uh, I, I came about this current theory because I found a clipping in um, an old newspaper in Texas, and I have like 109 pages of notes on Frank Dalton right now. So you may have to trim the video some while I'm going through the all the different places I've highlighted and things.
You're
But
all right. You're all right.
huh?
I said, you're all right. Go ahead. You got it.
Um, but I found this one article in on the Texas Portals to Texas History website, and it was dated earlier. Most times I've only found Frank Dalton, and other people that I've noticed have only found Frank Dalton back to maybe 1930, 1931, and before that he kind of goes off the map. And I found this article. What I did was I started searching for people who talked about Quantrell, because Frank, before the Jesse James stuff, he loved to talk about Quantrell. And so I found this article about possibly an alias he was using, and that really piqued my interest. But then also, it kind of gave me a avenue of research to look for him elsewhere, and it's dated May 1st, 1916. So that's about 15 years before we really have him on the radar, as far as newspaper clippings go. And the source is the Waco News Tribune out of Waco, Texas. And it says it's from the Hempstead News. It's reprinting from the Hempstead News. And he says, we're sometimes mistaken in appearances, and our opinions do not lead us to proper convictions at all times. This is just what has occurred in Hempstead during the past week in the visit of one J.W. Hopkins. So there's
Hmm.
a possible alias, or possibly the real name of
Mm-hmm.
J. Frank Dalton. But it says one J.W. Hopkins, painter and decorator, who is none other than the Frank J. Dalton of Civil War fame, as a member of the band of followers of the famous William Quantrell, or in reality Charles Hart, non-commissioned colonel in the Confederate Army. And it just goes on to talk about that. That was another angle of J. Frank Dalton. He touted this theory that Quantrell never died either, but he moved to Texas, and his real name was Charlie Hart, and he became a school teacher. But anyway, that's Frank Dalton in 1916, possibly using the name J.W. Hopkins, or possibly that could be what the Hempstead News is saying they got wrong, that wasn't really J.W. Hopkins. But anyway,
Right.
it says Frank J. Dalton is a painter and decorator. And so I started to find these clippings of Frank Dalton, the sign painter, who is just all over the place
Hmm.
before 1916. And he's also involved in some other crazy, you know, public exhibition stuff. In 1899, he was in Arkansas City. Uh, it says Arkansas City had a visitor whose presence a few years ago would have caused half the population of the city to hide out. Even the officers would have felt more secure. The visitor was Frank Dalton, one of the famous Dalton brothers. Frank has quit his meanness and is now traveling over the country as a professional sign writer. Okay, so these
Hmm.
guys, there were quite a few of these guys. They were called kind of like tramp printers. Of course, tramp had a different
Mm-hmm.
word meaning back then, but they would go around and paint signs and draw up handbills and stuff, and it was good work for a vagrant drunk, always on the move. So he's going around painting signs, and in 1900, he's claiming to be one of the Dalton brothers. Frank Dalton, one of the Dalton brothers, was in Tonkawa the other day. He's a sign painter. Uh, then he's also, a lot of the later papers, when they're describing Frank Dalton, they say he has long white hair, the white goatee. They say he's a big man. He's heavily built, large framed, that kind of thing. Well, in 1900, he's now a strong man. He stands on street corners and does these like bends iron bars and stuff. And then he's also a sign painter as well. But in 1900, Frank Dalton, the strong man, was cast into the city jail for being drunk and disturbing the peace. He was fined
Mm.
$5 and, turned loose.
And
And then he
and
moves
just
on.
just real quick before we go any further, the just so everybody's aware, Frank Dalton was an actual figure. He was
Yeah,
a brother to the notorious Dalton gang, but Frank Dalton, I believe, was actually a lawman.
he was. He
Am I
was a
getting that mixed
marshal.
up? Okay.
Nope, he was
So
a
yeah,
U.S.
Frank Dalton.
marshal.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
he
he
was at Fort Scott, I believe he worked out of, and
okay,
he got shot and killed in 1887, I think, or 1886.
right. So now we're just 13 years later, and now
Yeah,
Jay Frank has taken on the identity and saying that he is actually the former deputy Frank Dalton. And this is before
yeah,
he ever started claiming to have been Jesse James. This is way before
right,
that, right?
right.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
way before. Yeah, this is
gotcha. Yeah.
1900, and by 1930s, he is claiming to be an uncle of the Dalton gang. So
Mm,
he tweaks it as needed. But
mm-hmm. And the
he's
Daltons, nowadays, 2025, we think of okay. You ask a normie on the streets, name the most famous Wild West gunfighters or cowboys or outlaws. They're going to say Billy the Kid, Jesse James, Butch and
yeah,
Sundance, maybe. 99% of people are not going to say the Dalton gang.
no,
However, back at this time period, the year 1900, the Daltons were very, very famous. They were probably more famous at that point than Billy the Kid probably was.
yeah. I mean,
I don't have any evidence to back that up. I'm just going off my own opinion, but they were extremely famous at the turn of the century.
well, very famous. These are the guys who robbed the bank. Where was this at? I know these are elementary things I always flub up on, but I've been reading up on Northfield so much that I've forgotten where the Daltons robbed their bank at.
Was it
What
in?
town?
God
Um,
dang, man.
but
I'll have to look it up too. Yeah.
point being, they robbed the bank and big shootout. The ones who died, they propped up and took pictures of. So of course their pictures are all over the newspapers. You've got Emmett Dalton, who went to prison, and when he was pardoned, and he went around giving speeches, crime doesn't pay, that kind of thing, wrote a biography. I mean, these guys were at the time the top of the list when you're talking about celebrity outlaws. And you're right, they've diminished somewhat and given way to Jesse James and Billy the Kid. But yeah, the Daltons back then, this was someone that Frank Dalton could hang his hat on and ride the coattails of. Absolutely.
Mhm. That was Coffeeville, Kansas. I had to look it up real quick
Coffeeville.
where the
Okay,
bank
yeah.
property was. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Should have known
Um,
that.
do you have anything that's even older than 1900?
Yeah,
Have you been able to locate him on anything in the 19th century?
yeah, and this is where kind of the jumps happen, and we're gonna have to research this as a community to see if it pans out.
Mhm.
But um I mean, I'm confident that this is Frank Dalton going back, the sign painter.
Oh
There
yeah.
there are a few more. Captain Frank Dalton of Oklahoma, and this is in 1902, has been giving a free show on our streets, lifting heavy weights with his teeth, holding a team of horses, fire eating, and other tricks. He claims to be one of the notorious Dalton family. So in 1902, he's given exhibitions. He's bending bars of iron,
He
displaying
was a
feats of
carny.
strength. Right. And then he's
And this
traveling
dude,
around with
was
this
just a traveling carny, a transient. Yeah, okay.
100%. Yeah. I mean, these guys are doing what they can to make money. And I kind of understand Dalton a little more now because he led me into this world of traveling medicine shows and this 19th century, late 19th century form of entertainment and sales and snake oil sales and exhibitionism. And anyway, this is how I got on my rabbit trail. I found a reference to Frank Dalton. Um, in On November 15th, 1901, there was an article. Let me get the source for you, in the Daily Arkansas Gazette out of Little Rock, and it said Frank Dalton, otherwise known as Yellowstone Kit, one of the world's most famous living athletes, gave a series of street performances here the other night. And then it just talks about what he was doing, lifting a man weighing over 190 pounds in the chair he was sitting in, that kind of thing. I was like, Yellowstone Kit. Did Frank go by this name? Uh, and there was another old timer who was a liar and telling tall tales named Kit Dalton, and he wrote a book. I actually, I don't know if you can see it, Under the Black Flag, by uh, about his time with Quantrell and Kit Dalton. For a while, I thought Kit was actually a young, Frank Dalton back in the day. He wrote this around 1915 or so, but this guy
Mhm.
actually died in 1921. For the longest time,
Mm.
I thought J. Frank Dalton was part of this guy's family. I don't think he is now. I think he took a lot from Kit Dalton and learned a lot. But uh, I thought maybe this Yellowstone Kit, Kit Dalton, Yellowstone Kit, Frank Dalton, this all ties in together. So I looked into Yellowstone Kit. For the longest time, I thought Frank Dalton's this Yellowstone Kit. But Yellowstone Kit is actually a guy named George Grant who died in 1910 or 1912 in New Orleans.
Mhm.
Um, but then I found something interesting, and that was an article in, let me see, it was like 1888. Um, well, give me one more second.
Yeah, take your time. Take your time.
Uh, yeah, in 1888, January of 1888, um, in South Carolina, 6 prisoners escaped from jail. Um, and there's an arsonist, a guy who's in there for forgery, concealed weapons, all kinds of stuff. And the guy who orchestrated the escape and caused all this chaos is a guy named John Franklin, and he was in there for peddling without a license. And
Mm. Guess that's
I thought
better
that
than
was,
diddling without a license.
yeah,
Yeah,
which happens a lot.
yeah, I'm
But
telling you.
these guys, it turns out that John Franklin's wife, smuggled him some tools, and he bore a hole through the wall, and they all escaped. And
And
uh,
what year was this?
this was 1888 in South Carolina,
88. Oh, South
and
Carolina.
and
Okay.
and so there's a follow-up article which they track him down. They find John Franklin. He's like miles away from the jail, drunk with his wife, and they recapture him. And then his wife goes to Georgia, and she's arrested. And it's talking about the wife, and it says Mrs. Franklin's husband is from Atlanta. And in the directories made when he's in the city, he appears as John Franklin. Franklin is a vendor of patent medicines and moves about the country at will. 3 years ago, he was married in Jackson, Mississippi, and since that time has been traveling with his wife and child. And he tells
Mm.
people in South Carolina, he told them when he was arrested that he was working for Yellowstone Kit. And so I tracked this John Franklin back, and John Franklin was born about 1850 ish, 1852, something like that. Uh, and I did his whole family tree, and he is a traveler. He got in with Yellowstone Kit. and all his siblings I've been able to track throughout their life and their death and that kind of thing. John Franklin disappears. And when I think back to Frank Dalton's story,
Wow.
J. Frank Dalton told people his name was John Franklin Dalton, and he said he was from Georgia. He said he was from the famous Dalton family of Georgia, that the town of Dalton's named after, and that his mother was still living in Georgia. He would tell these newspaper writers these things that kind of like tie in with John Franklin, and it's not a big leap to think that this guy just added Dalton to his name as he's traveling around, um, and kept the John Franklin part. The last mention of John Franklin is actually in the death of his brother, um, and when he died in like 1920, it said John Franklin surviving as a brother, John Franklin of Alabama. But if this guy moves around a lot, I've yet to find any definitive presence of John Franklin in Alabama at all. So hopefully some folks can help research this and either prove it or disprove it. But my theory is, John Franklin's going around. He gets tied in with Yellowstone Kit. He's selling this patent medicines, and this took me down a huge road of the traveling medicine show. These were like these were if you can imagine a televangelist event with home shopping network vibes and an old crow medicine show performance and acrobats, like these guys would travel around with anyone they could find who entertained. They would set up in a public space. They would do a free show, no ticket sales, just everybody, all the town would come out, see these banjo players, these acrobats, these comedians, these actors, anybody who could do anything. They would join up with this troupe, and then in the course of the show, just like you're watching a show on TV and it takes a commercial break, the main man would get up and do a little speech and be like, by the way, this bottle of whatever Indian herbs cures everything you have, every problem. It's $5, and they would do these little gimmicks
Mhm.
and things. And that's the world that I think John Franklin got into. And he started traveling around, but he's not as good as some of these bigger guys, these Yellowstone Kits and all that. Because Yellowstone Kit was good. And he was at one time called a second Messiah because people just flocked to him, and he
Mhm.
had power over like the African American community. They would flock out and he would tell them, you guys deserve equal rights, and the white community would be like, stop stirring up the black people, it's really bothersome. And they would be like, this guy's like a second Messiah trying to lead these people. And they would
Right.
just so Yellowstone Kit was good, but you get Frank Dalton, John Franklin travels to South Carolina. He's got some of Yellowstone Kit's medicine, and he gets arrested for not getting a license, which all these medicine men knew you got to get a license to operate. And he goes to jail. And so he's not good at it. He's like a
Mhm.
B list medicine man. So they escape from jail, and the authorities, when they recapture him, they're like, this wasn't he wasn't even in there for a serious crime. But now he's let 6 other people out who were, and now we're kind of mad about it. But there's no follow-up to that. I don't know when he gets out or anything like that, but I he travels around. He's a big guy. He can do these gimmicks, these strongman gimmicks, right? When he shows up in the media as the Quantrell survivor and as Jesse James, he's got burns on his feet. He's been injured. He's broken his hip like 5 times. So, at some point, John Franklin he becomes unable to do these strongman gimmicks. He needs something else to survive. So of course he's going to be an outlaw with old timer tales. He's going to be he reads Kit Dalton's book and he thinks I can parrot this same stuff. Memorizes it like a script, and he's like, I rode with Quantrell. And these guys, they go to these Civil War reunions. They get in the newspaper, get their picture taken with Frank James, who's like, I don't know this guy, whatever. How you doing? And and then they say, see, I know Frank James, and they just build up their reputation, and all of a sudden they're giving talks. They can go to a church or a theater in town and talk about how crime doesn't pay. I used to kill Yankees, and now I'm telling you don't do drugs, basically, in modern parlance. So you can kind of
Well,
see from like,
w- one thing I hear a lot from people in regard to Brushy Bill Roberts, especially, is
yeah,
why would he lie? Why would they lie?
right,
What possible motive could they have to lie? Well, why does anybody lie? I've known many prolific liars in my life,
yeah,
but with these guys, they were being compensated for their stories. They were,
yes,
you know, if you go to a church and you give a speech back in those days, at the very least, you were getting a very nice meal, and they were probably taking a collection for you. You know,
yes,
Brushy Bill Roberts, he finally got to travel. He went to New York City. He went to the Meermac Caves. J. Frank
expenses
Dalton,
paid. Hmm.
all expenses paid, man. So why does anybody lie? I think a lot of times it comes down to ego, but these guys were also in it for the money. The payday may not have been what they were hoping for, but they were definitely being compensated for their stories.
Oh yeah, and money isn't the only pay. I mean, these guys craved attention, and they and, and again, I don't think their bar was very high even for money. Like, these guys are getting old. They don't have anybody to take care of them. They've abandoned their families. J. Frank Dalton got taken care of in a Confederate veterans hospital because he registered as a veteran of Quantrell's militia. Um, Brushy, same kind of thing that he tried. I mean, these guys had people taking care of them because of who they said they were. Dalton went from Lee Houck's house to Ola Everhard, who also figures into the Brushy story, her house, staying with these people. Lester Dill at Merrimack Caverns put him up. He had free housing, free food, free drink, and attention, big time attention. And to explore the motives of Brushy and Dalton, when Brushy was meeting with Governor Mabry in 1950, someone asked him, like, what's the deal? Like, why are you doing this? What's the big issue here? And Brushy snapped, they're going to build a monument for me because I was such a good Indian scout. They're building a monument for me in Hyco. And so you see his motivation. Like, he's not even really concerned about life right now, but he's going to have a monument. Like, that's it. Like, that's what they're going to do. When he was pressed about what's the big deal here, he said they're going to build a monument for me. And I thought, if I ever do a book on these fraudsters, or maybe if you and I co-author one, I always wanted to call it "They Will Build Monuments." And
I like
because
it. I
that
like it.
seems to be what it comes down to. Like, these guys want to be remembered and known. They want to be celebrities. Um, and that's just how it is.
Another thing, you mentioned Jay Frank. By the time he got older, his feet were covered with burns. His body was physically falling apart.
Yeah.
Uh, Guarantee you, he was telling people those were war injuries. I
Oh,
promise you, he
yeah.
was, just like with Brushy Bill Roberts. Brushy Brushy Bill. I hate to keep bringing this back to Brushy Bill, but their stories are so similar. I know more
Absolutely.
about Brushy Bill. That's why I keep using him as an example. But Brushy was a laborer. He was a hired laborer. He did blue collar type work. He was a
Yeah.
farmer. I think he may have even worked in the oil fields for a little bit. Um, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's a dignified work.
Yeah.
I'm not denigrating that whatsoever. I spent the majority of my life doing that type of work.
Yeah.
But he would then say that he had all these wounds. Now, obviously, there's no evidence that he had wounds, but I will say this much. My own father, my dad is 79 years old now. He grew up on a cotton farm. He spent his entire life working blue collar labor. Uh, and my dad actually did go to war. My dad was in Vietnam. He was never injured
Yeah.
in Vietnam, though. But the man's got scars all over his body just from work related accident. My dad's missing part of a finger, part of
Yeah.
two fingers. He could easily tell you, "Oh yeah, I lost that finger in the war," which he
Yeah.
was in the war, but he could. My dad's got scars all over his body. Was never injured in combat. He was never hit by shrapnel. He was never shot by a bullet. But
Yeah.
you couldn't tell that by looking at him. He could very easily pull it off. I'm sure the same was the. I'm sure the. What am I trying to say
Face
here? I'm
was the
sure that
same.
was the same for Brushy
Yeah.
and J. Frank Dalton.
Absolutely.
I knew a guy. I, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
My dad had he was a cement finisher, and he had a piece of metal lodged in his thumb under his skin, and he would always be like, "You can feel that piece of metal." He could have told people that was shrapnel from a mortar round or something. Yeah.
My I hate to say this because now it seems like we're having a my dad can beat up your dad contest, but no, I should have mentioned this a second ago. My dad was it was this is a total hunting accident, but he literally got shot in the face with birdshot. He was fine. Thankfully, it didn't hit his eyes. But to this day, when I was a kid, you could really see him like in here, the little BBs embedded under his skin.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, he went to wash his face one day, and one of them just fell out. And to this day, I believe in his nose, he's still got a couple of those like embedded in there that just haven't worked their way out. It's a script that continues to be written. You know, people lied about being in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
People, even very famous people right now, are lying about their service in Iraq and Afghanistan on YouTube.
Yeah.
And going
Yeah.
all the way back to those days, you had guys like J. Frank Dalton also, or Brushy Bill definitely also lying about wounds that were never received in any type of combat. So,
And
which we have stolen valor nowadays with Navy SEALs. These guys is stolen valor for Old West valor, essentially.
yeah, stolen outlaw valor or something. Uh,
Yeah, exactly.
these guys, it was much easier for them. It was much harder to disprove. Um, this guy, for instance, this Kit Dalton, um, he he's buried. He died in 1921, I believe, and he is buried in a cemetery with this huge Confederate veteran headstone, all honor to this Southern hero. Here's a picture of him with Frank James at the Quantrell reunion. I mean, you look at this stuff and you're like, he's got to be legit. You know, his name was J.W. Dalton. He was never in the Civil War. Not no branch. He was born in Kentucky, and he ended up in Memphis, Tennessee, and never he was not even in the Civil War. This guy made it to the end and received a honorary Confederate headstone and everything, and he was never even in the war. These guys were successful at it. Uh, but you see things like that. This scar issue. Jesse James, Frank Dalton, apparently when he died in 1952 or 51, um, apparently the sheriff looked at his body and said, yeah, he had a ton of scars. Definitely believe he was Jesse James. William Morrison, apparently after Brushy Bill's death, said, I looked at his scars, documented them, definitely there. um, which is, I mean, is ironic. William Tunstall, the big Brushy advocate back in the 80s, was like, he had all the same.
No relation to John Tunstall, by the way.
Right, ironically enough, but he was like, he had all the same scars as Billy. How do you explain that? We don't know what scars Billy had. It's a stupid argument. We have no idea any scars Billy had. So I don't understand the people who are able to just walk away from arguments like that without addressing the fact that it's a stupid, faulty argument in the first place. But there are elements
Well,
like
it's
that.
because they really, at the end of the day, a lot of the people that are making the claims about Brushy Bill and J. Frank Dalton, they really don't know all that much about Billy the Kid or Jesse James.
Right.
And that's not, I'm not trying to insult anyone. We all know, we only know what we know. Not everybody has the, what is it? Not everybody can read all of the books or
Oh
all of the
yeah.
source material. And I'm just learning this just now. I'm just going and purchasing a lot of the source material for just Billy the Kid. Dude, all
Yeah.
these books over here, all
Yeah.
these, which they're probably not on camera right now, but I got stacks and stacks of books that is just the source material on Billy the Kid. And this
Yeah.
is the same stuff that other authors like, Utley and Nolan, this is the same stuff they use for their research,
Yeah.
but not everybody gets a chance to read all that stuff, man. Some of these
No.
books are hard to find.
Oh,
So
well,
you
and
just hear, well,
a lot of source material is not even in books. You have to get it from library collections, and for instance,
mhm.
like the Haley Library, you can only view 80%, I think, of a document unless you're actually on site. as part of
You
the
got to go
agreement.
there in
So, like,
person. Yep.
yeah, so it's
And
near impossible sometimes.
yeah. So, well, you hear about, well, Billy the Kid, he has to have been shot many, many times because he was an outlaw. I mean, he was supposedly wounded when they ambushed Sheriff Brady.
Yes.
Excuse me. Is my theory that it must not have been that of a wound because he was on his feet fighting against Buckshot Roberts just a few days later, right?
Yeah, if
And
anything,
other than that,
he was grazed, but maybe not then, and I'll tell you why, because, Dr. Ely had a book, a copy of Garrett's Authentic Life, and, this is the doctor who lived in Lincoln at McSween's house through the Lincoln War. So he was there. He treated Jim French when he got shot at the Brady assassination, and he wrote in the margins of Garrett's book when they talk about Billy getting, shot during the Brady assassination, he says, "Was not hurt." So, like, he was adamant about that, so I kinda tend to believe Bonnie didn't get a scratch, you know?
let me ask you a question,
Yeah.
and I would like you to be as honest as you're able to. How much are you being paid by I don't know if it's the Smithsonian, maybe you're getting paid
Yeah.
by the tourist department of New Mexico. How much are you getting paid
I like to
to
call it
tell
big
all these
history,
lies?
and I thought one of my
Big history.
terms
Are you getting paid off by big history?
yeah, I thought one of my
Because
terms
I
for
have
coming
yet to
on
see a
this
fucking check.
one of my terms for
Yeah.
coming on this was that we didn't discuss this.
Oh, hey man, I am letting the people know. No,
That's hardcore journalism, man.
I recently released a fun episode about there's a oral legend passed down
The
amongst the
Giants
northern
bones?
Paiute. Yeah, yeah, that
Yeah,
they had once fought a war against these like redheaded cannibals, and in the years that passed, it got turned into giant redheaded cannibals.
yeah,
And I tried to offer up a few logical explanations that hair can change color after death, and they weren't really giants. There was one body, mummified body, that was 6.5 feet tall.
yeah,
And this is no lie. I am now having people send emails and leave comments accusing me of being paid off by
yeah,
basically the Estonian.
yeah.
That
Hey,
I'm
we got that a lot when I would first started doing, guest appearances with Michael Giudicissi on his All Things Billy the Kid thing. I mean, people would come at him and be like, you're shilling for the mainstream, like, they're just trying to keep this suppressed," and it's like, "Who are you talking about?"
who
Like,
who is
there's
they? Who is
yeah,
they?
it's
Not that many
insanity.
people visit Fort Sumner.
Right.
Okay, the New
Yeah,
Mexico is not exactly swimming in tourism money
yeah,
as we speak. You know,
yeah,
so
not at all, and
I don't know where
that's
people get this from, but you
it's
are clearly just to establish you are clearly bought and paid for, right?
right, yeah.
Okay,
Given,
okay.
my, budget podcast mic, my, subpar 4K camera, and, the very, palatial house that I live in,
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
even
yeah,
afford a
yeah.
real Conan sword, it's foam. It's not even a real sword behind
Oh
me,
man,
so
well, look,
they
dude,
need to
I'm
increase
wearing
the
I'm wearing clothes from Ross right now, dress for less. Ain't that Ross?
but,
Well,
it's insanity, man, because, look at this, you gotta believe stuff. I mean, this book here, Jesse James was one of his name. It's called The Black Book, and it's by Del
mhm,
Schrader, but it kinda came from the mind of Jesse James III, and Jesse James
mm,
III, grandson of Jesse James, that's Orvis Lee Hauk. He changed his name to Jesse James III after J. Frank Dalton died and started saying that J. Frank Dalton was his grandpa, which, no. But if you read this book, I mean, the people that claim that J. Frank Dalton was Jesse James, that there is a Knights of the Golden Circle, which really was a Confederate fraternal society at the time, but
mhm.
that there's some Knights of the Golden Circle that's a Masonic type secret society that is storing, you know, caches of gold everywhere and treasure, waiting for the right time to, with their secret passwords, unveil those storage bins of treasure to fund the rising South once again and like reclaim the glory. And that Jesse James was like the lead captain of this. How far? into delusion do you have to go and not be able to have the introspection to look at yourself and be like, am I really like, am I believing the right thing here? Am I looking at facts? Okay. This book, if you
Well,
open it up on like the first page, page 3, it says, with the increased interest in mysticism, the occult, and the metaphysical, today's readers will be more apt to accept the premise that Jesse James was a practitioner of the ancient arts. He had an African born black mystic, Mother Rebecca, was a slave of the James family, and she helped him develop his keen powers of second sight and how to go out of body. So Jesse James was an astral traveler, in
right.
addition, and
Yeah.
that's how he knew how to be everywhere. I mean, these are the people that you're believing when you say, well, I think J. Frank Dalton could have been Jesse James. These are the people who are making money off of this old man, first off, after he dies, and off of the folks who believe this. And it's no basis in reality, man. No basis.
100% agree.
Yeah.
It's just, I think, normal life can be boring sometimes.
Boring.
What's more fun to imagine that Jesse James just got shot in the back of the head and that was it?
Yeah.
His career came to an end. He was done. Greatest outlaw of all time, easily killed by one bullet to the back of the head.
Yeah.
But what's more fun, that or this idea that he could do like astral projection, that he was a member of this secret Illuminati type group that controlled
Right.
everything. They have all these hoards of gold, and that he made it all the way to well over 100 years old.
Yeah.
It's just it's more fun to think about it being that way. What's
Well,
more fun? The
and the
idea
fact
that giants exist,
yes.
or that it was just an abnormally tall person. You know what I'm saying? It's just
Yeah.
we invent things to make life more interesting.
It's
It's one
exciting.
thing to talk about it. It's exciting. But when you really, really like, yeah, I'm like you. I don't understand when people just truly believe this stuff with every fiber of their being to the point that they get angry about it.
They do.
They get very mean sometimes when you don't buy into the same stories they're buying into without
Frankly, it's kind of
any
scary.
semblance of proof.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
kind of scary because they can be very
it's a little
offended,
scary.
like it's like, I'm sorry, I
And
can't
they vote.
accept your yeah, I can't accept your tale of, Illuminatis and exchanging,
Mhm.
body doubles, body triples, mummies of John Wilkes Booth. It's like it's insane.
Right,
And
yeah.
it's a scary territory. But I mean, it I think even more than being boring, it a lot of times we're creatures oriented to the story, to plot, rising action, conflict, climax, and resolution. And that's how a story goes. That's why we go to a movie and we see life, and it doesn't work like that. And our brains don't like it. We want plot. And a lot of times there's no plot. Billy the Kid's story was still going. He had more to the story. He was in his, 21, 20. He could have fled to Mexico. What's he going to do with Paulita? There's more to the story. He walks into Pete's bedroom, gets shot and dies. It ends. There's no resolution. There's no showdown with Pat. There's no final words. We don't like that. Jesse James turns to adjust a picture. The outlaw who's eluded the Pinkertons, who's made all the new written letters to newspapers and laughed at the justice system of the greatest nation in the world, gets popped in the head by Bob Ford while he's fixing a painting. It's not cool. It's not rock star. There's no plot. We don't like that, but that's just how it is. It's how it happens. And it sucks sometimes, but it also makes for history can be very interesting too. And just as rewarding when you don't flood it with conspiracies and weirdness. But
Well said. And that's my thing. There's so much great fiction out there.
yeah,
There's even great fantasy fiction, science fiction.
love both
History
of
is
those.
history.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. You don't necessarily have to change history to make it more exciting. I agree.
No.
History is plenty of exciting, and when you want a little something extra, maybe you want a little bit of elf action or some gnomes, or
Yep.
maybe a sprite or a dancing fairy of some sort. You can always pop open some science fiction or some young adult
Dude,
novels. There's a lot of that out there.
I love Young Guns too. give me a movie where Billy survives. It's fantastic, but it's fiction,
Hmm.
and you just got to know where to draw that
Yep.
line. Another element uh, that should make people think, like these same elements pop up everywhere, like the scars thing we were talking about. But every fraud has a trunk that has all of the identifying things in it, and if people could only find that trunk, it would prove everything. J. Frank Dalton
Right.
said he had one. John Shevlin and about 3 other people took off to Texas looking for it. Never found it. This was while he was alive. Brushy apparently had a trunk that had all the things in it. His anti-horse thief association papers, all this stuff that proved he was where he said he was, never been found. John Miller,
Imagine that.
the Billy the Kid claimant from Arizona, when his wife died in a fire, apparently that trunk full of all this proof burned up. I mean, it's always the trunk,
Oh
and you
no.
would think if
Yeah.
you're reading this stuff, you would is there no skeptical part of you that thinks, "Hey, maybe there's not a trunk in these things. Maybe that's just something these people use." Like,
Or maybe they got to it first.
big
You ever think
history
about
getting
that?
those
Maybe the
trunks.
museum people got to it first. Maybe the
Yeah,
tourism departments got to it first, or the Pinkertons. But
yeah,
no, yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. There's always something else out there that if only we could locate this thing, it'll make it all make sense, But
yep,
at the end of the day, with J. Frank Dalton, with Brushy Bill, and all these guys, they made a lot of claims, and none
yeah,
of the claims have any evidence to back them up.
yeah,
It'd be what at least they could have made the lies believable. And if
mhm,
Brushy had just kept his mouth shut and not said any of the other crap about, living with all these
yes,
Native American tribes and being a lookout for Bell Star and being a Pinkerton and a Rough Rider and a mercenary, his story would be not necessarily believable, but it would be plausible. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? But they
But
just
that's when
kept
they
on
fall
going.
into it. They fall back on that. Well, Brushy was an outlaw in hiding. He was gonna lie about things. So now you can't even fact check their claims because, of course, they're lying.
Yeah,
So, like,
of
you're just
course.
you're gonna end the day no matter what believing that Brushy was Billy, regardless. So
Right,
there's
right.
no dialogue.
Make a segue real quick.
Yeah.
So, earlier you were talking about, there's a lot of stuff that is cool in the movies. Like movies and stories have a resolution and they have, what do you call it? The arc of the story and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And real life may not necessarily be so cut and dry. I think a great example of this is the Lincoln County War and Billy the Kid in general. There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that we leave out of the movies because it's very complicated. For instance, when a lot of people think about Billy the Kid, they think about, okay, he was being hunted by Sheriff Pat Garrett. But in all reality, there was a bunch of Texas cowboys from the Panhandle that were also hunting Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
He was being hunted by a lot of people. Pat Garrett was just one of those people. Another one of those people that was hunting Billy the Kid, at least at first, that never, as far as I know, he's never made it into any movies, was a Secret Service operative named
Yeah.
Azariah Wild. And I remember when I did my series on Billy the Kid a couple of years ago, I remember being really intrigued about this guy because you never hear about him.
Yeah.
He's got a cool name, number one. Number two, he
Yeah.
was in the Secret Service, right?
Secret
And
Service. Yep.
yeah, he teamed up with he had a little posse with Bob Ollinger and I forget who else. And
Uh,
Azariah Wild was traveling around and just getting a lot of intel, trying to figure out. There was a counterfeiting ring that
yeah.
he was after, which kind of tied him in with Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
I've always been curious about this guy. I remember when I was doing that series, I couldn't find any additional information. I couldn't even find
Mhm.
a picture of the guy. I didn't know what happened to him after, his involvement there in New Mexico.
Yeah.
Well, you have recently written a book about Azariah Wild. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, and happy to. I've really come to be fascinated by Azariah Wild, or Azariah, as I've called him Azariah throughout my whole research. And then I tracked down like a third or fourth great grandson in New Orleans, and I was like, "Dude, how do you pronounce this? How does the family say it?" And he's like, "Azariah." So I've tried like hell to get myself to switch over because but it's a cool name either way,
Azariah.
Azariah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't even know how I stumbled on this project. But folks will say you've written a book about Azariah, but I've compiled a book about Azariah because what it is a that's such a West Virginia phrase. What it is it's a compilation of his daily reports. As a Secret Service agent, all agents had to send a report every day to their chief, who at that time was James J. Brooks. So at that time, the Secret Service was a branch of the U.S. Treasury Department, and their main focus was counterfeit money, fraudulent claims against the government, and that kind of thing. So they weren't quite presidential detail yet, and that sort of work. But he had to. So as a Secret Service agent, you would do your work, and then at the end of the day, or on a Sunday afternoon, you would sit down and write out everything you did that day, and send it to your chief, and they would file it away. Well, the National Archives has all of these reports of all the agents, tons and tons. And Azariah Wild has volumes of his daily reports on the National Archives website. Thankfully, volunteers have scanned those images in, and they're available online. I was pouring through them one day and thought, like, this needs to be publicly available because what we read, we were talking about sources earlier and how it's just not really available to a lot of people. Um, that Donna Tadding has the Dudley Court of Inquiry that she's put out. That's a valuable source material, and something that you can go to that's firsthand, and it's a great reference. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with Wild. I wanted to take all of his reports from when he was ordered to go to New Mexico to when he came back to New Orleans, which is where he worked out of, and transcribe them, annotate them, and just make them available to readers so that they didn't have to go to the National Archives, look at handwritten, it's hard to read this old cursive, and didn't have to pour through these old image files and things like that. So I just wanted to make it available.
Yeah.
That's why I like to tell folks that the book is a resource. It's a research tool more than like an enjoyable biography or something you sit down and read. It's a firsthand source material type research tool. And there is a short biography at the beginning of Wild, maybe like 5 or 6 pages. And his life was interesting. He lived in New Orleans, he was a Secret Service agent there. And his whole life reads like the things he was involved in. It's just, it could be a TV show. And maybe someday I'll write a
Yeah.
screenplay about it. But it's he deserves to be remembered and spotlit. I don't know. He deserves to be remembered
One of those.
and, shine a little light on him because he's often overlooked, like you said. And when he
Oh
is
yeah.
mentioned, if you read Nolan or Mills, I think Mills when he talks about Wild, and don't get me wrong, I love Mills. We're good friends, but he says it's like the Keystone Cops when Wild came out, that he was just a lot. Everybody talks like Wild bungled his job and did a horrible, that he was incompetent and that he just made a mess of it. And I disagree with that. He was a very capable Secret Service agent. And when you read his daily reports, especially the other cases he worked on, he was very diligent, very attentive to detail, brave, willing to go in
Mhm.
there and do the job. The problem is when he got to New Mexico, he was looking for Billy Wilson and Tom Cooper, two guys that rode with Billy the Kid, and they were accused of counterfeiting. And he could only go, this is a guy who lives in New Orleans. He gets to New Mexico. He doesn't know the geography, doesn't know the terrain, doesn't know the people, doesn't know frontier life, honestly, if you want to talk about civilization versus frontier living. And he's got to rely on people like Judge Ira Leonard and James Dolan to tell him who the bad guys are, who is possibly
Right.
doing
Right.
what. and that can get confusing, and he can receive wrong information. And this is a guy doing the best he can with what he's given. But
Mhm.
I felt he deserved a re-examination and a reevaluation, and treated with a little more weight than what he's been treated. Just as a footnote in the Billy the Kid story.
Agree 100%, and I can't wait to get a copy. I mean, the way you describe it as being sort of a resource as opposed to
Mhm.
like an actual story, it really reminds me to kind of what David G. Thomas does. His books, they're not necessarily, you don't sit down for an evening of light reading, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's only he's only pulling from the primary sources, and
Yes.
he's not including any speculation or anything like
Right.
that. He's just giving you, okay, these are the facts, these are the dates, this is what happened based on the
Yes.
evidence that we have.
I tell you,
I like that. I like that story or that
David
style.
Thomas is such a breath of fresh air when it comes to researchers and a
Yep.
historian's historian. I mean, his books, yes, they're not light reading, but they're just, you're just
Mhm.
getting the source material, and you're not getting any spin,
That's it.
no
Yep.
presumption, no author presuppositions. It's just straight up
Hmm.
historical fact. He's really, he deserves a lot more credit in the field, a lot more spotlight himself. He's great. I will say, given that, acknowledging that this Wild book is just source material, it's a pretty fast read, and I think it's also engaging because the way it's set up, the way those reports were structured, it reads almost like a first person account of like a detective
Mm.
novel or something. Or if you think of Bram Stoker's Dracula, John Harker is writing these letters in first person, and it's very cool. He's like, I arrived in New Mexico at this time, and
Yeah.
James Dolan told me about Tom Cooper, and you're like, all these people that you're seeing them in a new light and stuff, and it's like, that's cool. And
Yeah.
it's a fast read, and it's interesting, even if it is source material. I think it is engaging
Oh
and
yeah.
very interesting. At some point, I would like to transcribe all of his letters and
Hmm.
let people see the whole story. Because I've gone back and forward, and he's into some interesting stuff. There was actually in 1875, he was working with the Treasury Department to kind of break up this whiskey ring. We talk about the Santa Fe ring. There was a whiskey ring in New Orleans and elsewhere, and they tried to assassinate him. A guy walked up to him near the riverbank as Wild was walking, and he said, "Are you Azariah Wild? Azariah Wild?" And he said, "Yeah." And he stabbed him, and he ended up stabbing Azariah 7 times, I think, and he slashed his cheek and his tongue. And they got into a struggle, and Azariah fought back, and they rolled down the riverbank almost to the shore, and the guy took off running, and just a crazy story. And this guy, he went through it, and so I'd like to share those
Yeah.
stories with people. I think it'd be very interesting.
Yeah. Well, where can
Yeah.
people get the book at? And what's the full
Amazon.
title?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's called A Most Noted Man. I took that from a newspaper article that when he got a promotion around 1886 or 7, he said, an Arkansas paper said, Azariah Wild, one of the most noted men in the Secret Service. So I titled the book A
Ah,
Most Noted Man, a Secret Service agent in the land of Billy the Kid, I believe is the subtitle. And it's just his
all
daily
right.
reports, annotated with expansions by myself and Josh Slatton, and
All right.
an introduction. And I think it's a good addition to the researcher's library. It's You'll read a lot about his reports and his quotes, as they pertain to certain
Mhm.
things, but to have all the reports available in context and to get that data yourself, I just think everybody needs access to firsthand sources to the actual material.
Yep.
So that's what I wanted to do.
You did it, man. And, just a little bit about you, if anybody is listening to this and is unfamiliar. You're also, I know we've discussed this before. My memory is horrible, but I can't remember if you are a founding member, but you are definitely a member of the Billy the Kid Historical Coalition.
Yeah,
Y'all actually
yeah.
have a magazine. I am a member as of recently to the Billy the Kid Historical Coalition, but
Yeah.
the Billy the Kids Coalition Press. I was
Yes.
actually pretty pleasantly surprised when I got this in the mail because this is no amateur zine or anything like that. This is a legit, very professional magazine, just chock full of Billy the Kid history. And is what every quarter y'all put one of these out?
Once a year. This is annual.
Okay, once a year.
And we it comes with your membership packet for folks who join up. And
Yeah,
I got the hardback here, and it's like a Dungeons and Dragons starter manual. It's quality stuff,
yeah,
man.
nice man. It's
We've
very
come a
quality stuff.
we've come a long way. Uh, we've got a coalition member named Matt Carr, and Matt
Mm,
works on in design and publications, and he volunteered his work for this one, and you can really see how professional he made it, and he did a great job.
absolutely.
And we've had we do the best we can, and people coming on board and offering us their time and their skills to make
Mm,
all of this better has really it continues to take it to a next level. And I'm not a founding member, but I did join early on. I think in like 2022, maybe something like that. It was
okay.
founded 2021, and I think in my email I still have the first order where I signed up for membership. It said like order number 8 or something on the
Yeah,
invoice.
yeah,
So like
yeah.
it was early on in their
You're up there.
invoice book. But yeah, man, what really got me into it and what turned me on with the coalition was that they were marking graves. They were putting headstones on folks like
Mhm.
Jim Carlisle, Jose Chavez, Tom Pickett, Frank Cahill, all these players in the Billy the Kid story who've gone from the
Yeah.
1800s, 1877 in Cahill's case, all the way up to now with no headstone, just unmarked, with nobody knowing, walking by and not knowing that, hey, this is a significant history piece here.
Yeah.
And so they were doing real world stuff like that. And I wanted to
Mhm.
definitely lend my uh, finances, skills, time, anything I could to help that happen. And it's been a great journey. I've
Yeah,
gone
and you're
to
doing a hell of a job, man.
it's been a good
I
time. I've
will
gone
to
to
this
Lincoln with
day,
them.
dude. Yeah, have you?
Yeah, it was a good
Y'all
time.
have a event. Are you gonna be there this summer? There's an event, right, in
It's
Lincoln?
September, so like a month. Uh,
Okay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Lord willing, I'll be heading down there. It's September 20th is the day that we're doing most of the shindig, and the Sunday after we're gonna go up to Stinking Springs and Fort Sumner, and yeah, it's gonna be a good time. We sold out tickets for that real quick and trying to make it a cool event. But that's the coalition convention, September 20th. You froze up there, man. It's just it's a wonderful pause screen. But yeah, I can't hear or see you, but it's btkcoalition.com for the coalition, and Chasing Billy on YouTube. If you just type in Chasing Billy in the search bar, it'll bring you to our channel. Subscribe, like all our videos, keep us in business, and chasingbilly.com is the website, and you can also get there from there. But Josh, I'll just wait for you, buddy, to jump back on. I'm not leaving the studio ever.